we are going to begin on the pancreas. This is the 7th endocrine gland we are looking at now. So just as we agreed yesterday, we look at the organ, we look at the location, we look at the parts, we look at the functional cell types, we look at the hormones these cells produce, then we look at the effects of these hormones, and if there's something clinical to highlight, then we do highlight. So having said that, the pancreas is located just behind the stomach. That region behind the stomach is known as the stomach bed. Usually around the curvature of the duodenum. This is the duodenum. This is the pancreas. Or this is the duodenum, and this is the pancreas. So around the curvature of the duodenum, behind the stomach, is where you find the pancreas. In terms of anatomical parts, it has a tail, which is this one. This is the body of the pancreas. This is the neck of the pancreas. This is the head of the pancreas. And this lower projection is what we call the uncinate process. So here, this is the uncinate process. This is the head. Around here will be the neck. This is the body, and this is the tail of the pancreas. Those are the gross anatomical parts. What we are more interested in are the histological parts, or what we call the physiological parts. So physiologically or histologically, we consider the pancreas as having two components. We have the exocrine component and the endocrine component. We will look at them just to highlight the exocrine, but remember the intention is to talk about the endocrine. So let me say something brief about the exocrine pancreas. The exocrine pancreas consists of what we call the pancreatic acini. These are the acini. So these acini produce pancreatic juice into the pancreatic ductal system. They release the juice into the pancreatic ducts. And this juice is the one that is taken, transported up to the duodenum. This juice contains digestive enzymes and bicarbonate. Of course, there's water within there. So bicarbonate and digestive enzymes, that juice contains it. As you can see, at some point, it opens together with the bile. Now, that is not the intention of this lecture, because this is focusing on the endocrine component. So that is just the exocrine pancreas. How about the endocrine pancreas? Now, when you talk about the endocrine pancreas, we are talking about clusters of hormone-producing cells. These clusters of hormone-producing cells are the ones known as the islets of Langerhans. There are clusters of hormone-producing cells. We call them islets of Langerhans. Most of the islets, these are islets, basically, surrounded by the pancreatic acini. Most of the islets of Langerhans are located in the tail of the pancreas. That does not mean that they're not found in the head. They're actually all over, except majority are concentrated on the pancreatic tail. These islets of Langerhans contain several cell types which secrete different categories of hormones. The cell types that we find in the islets of Langerhans are these ones. We have the alpha cells, beta cells, delta cells, and PP cells, just to mention the major ones. So these cells are the ones that will then secrete hormones. And so therefore we want to look at the hormones which these cells secrete. So one of the hormones secreted from the islets of Langerhans is glucagon. Glucagon is the one produced by the alpha cells. The other name given to alpha cells is A cells. The key role of glucagon is to increase the serum sugar level. It increases serum sugar level. The second hormone is insulin. Insulin is secreted by the beta cells, which are also called the B cells. And the key role of insulin is to now lower the sugar levels. Now I want you to think through those two hormones for a moment and ask yourself, if insulin lowers sugar level, through what mechanism does it actually do this? I want someone to attempt. You can unmute yourself and answer. By which mechanism does insulin use to lower sugar level?
Can I try?
Can I try?
Okay, Catherine can try.
By inhibiting the production of glucagon.
Okay.
Can I try?
That could be possible, though a very indirect one. Yes, someone else can try.
Hilary,
Yes, Hilary?
I think insulin helps in the movement of glucose through the cell membrane.
Very good. And that's the principal mechanism. Insulin increases uptake of glucose by cells. So in the presence of insulin, glucose moves from the plasma, from the interstitial fluid into the cell. So when a patient is coming with very high sugar levels and you give them insulin, it doesn't mean you break down that glucose or the patient now loses the glucose in urine. It just means that the glucose redistributes from being in the interstitial space and as well as plasma into the cells. So that's one principal mechanism. But there are other mechanisms that insulin can also work. Inhibition of glucagon is just one of those minor mechanisms. There are other mechanisms like promoting now, let's say, formation of glycogen, inhibiting breakdown of fats so that you don't form glucose, inhibiting gluconeogenesis and the like. All right, the overall aim is that the sugar levels will be reduced in the serum. Somatostatin is a third hormone. This hormone is the one secreted by the delta cells, which can also be called the D cells. You notice that we don't have C. The somatostatin hormone inhibits the secretions from the pancreas. These secretions can either be endocrine secretions, but most of the time, it will be the exocrine secretions. So somatostatin will inhibit secretion of pancreatic juice. It tends to work in the opposite direction as growth hormone. This is somatostatin. Growth hormone is somatotropin, which means somatotropin stimulates growth. Somatostatin inhibits growth in a way. The last hormone is pancreatic polypeptide. Pancreatic polypeptide is secreted by the PP cells, which are also called the F cells. So don't confuse again. We don't have E cells. After D, we go to F. Pancreatic polypeptide, the role is not clearly defined, but there's evidence to suggest that it slows down absorption of food along the GIT. So these are the hormones secreted by the islets of Langerhans. Okay, I'm supposed to give you a question there, but I doubt if it mounted. So I'll skip this because I'm using a different device. Okay, but I want to give you this one to discuss in your groups. So I'm dividing you into small groups. You'll have 5 minutes to discuss this question. Something will pop on your screen. So just accept the group I've given you, even if you don't like the members of the group. Right, welcome back. So the next endocrine organ we're going to talk about is the testis. We will not talk about the other function of the testis. We're just going to focus on endocrine testis. Just an overview. The parenchyma of the testis consists of what we call seminiferous tubules, which is the site of spermatogenesis. But there's some loose connective tissue between the seminiferous tubules, which we call the interstitial tissue. So these are the seminiferous tubules. Between adjacent seminiferous tubules, we have some loose connective tissue, which we are calling the interstitial tissue. So if this is the seminiferous tubule, this is the interstitial tissue. Within this interstitial tissue, there's some cells. The cells within this interstitial tissue are known as the interstitial cells of Leydig. These are the cells that secrete hormones in the testis, and the hormones the testis secrete are called androgens. You remember androgens are male sex hormones. So you need to know something about androgens in terms of the hormonal axis that leads to the secretion of androgens. The hormonal axis that leads to the secretion of androgens is known as the hypothalamo-hypophyseal testicular axis. It simply means that the signal must be coming from hypothalamus, as we've already seen, and that signal goes to the pituitary gland, which we are calling hypophysis. Then pituitary gland then signals the testis. So let's see, which hormone does hypothalamus secrete that goes to the pituitary gland? That hormone is gonadotropin releasing hormone. So hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone, and that hormone acts on the anterior pituitary, what we call adenohypophysis. Adenohypophysis responds by then producing those gonadotropin, because this is gonadotropin releasing hormone. So adenohypophysis responds by secreting the gonadotropins, which then goes to the testis. That's why we call them gonadotropic. They are tropic to the gonad. So which are these two gonadotropic hormones? You remember we talked about follicle stimulating hormone yesterday, as well as luteinizing hormone. So these two hormones are gonadotropic. Now, what does follicle stimulating hormone do to the testis? The target cells of FSH on the testis are the Sertoli cells. And the effect of FSH stimulation on the testis is spermatogenesis. So FSH promotes formation of spermatogenesis, which means that FSH actually targets the seminiferous tubules. The seminiferous epithelium. The Sertoli cells are within the seminiferous epithelium, which is the site of spermatogenesis. On the other hand, the interstitial cells of Leydig are the ones targeted by the luteinizing hormone. And the effect of LH stimulation on the interstitial cells of Leydig is secretion of androgens. Now let's talk about androgens. Androgens are actually steroid hormones. We have said they are male sex hormones. They are steroidal in nature. We know that androgens are produced both by interstitial cells of Leydig. So this is the testicular production, but they're also produced by the zona reticularis, and this is the adrenal production. The adrenal gland produces androgens. The testis produces androgens. The adrenal production, you realize, therefore, is present in both males and females. The testicular production is only in males. So which androgens come from the testis? The key testicular androgens are these two. We have testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. The key adrenal androgen is this one, epiandrostenedione. That's a key adrenal androgen. You can add dihydro to this one, then get the other one. So it will be dihydro epiandrostenedione. So these are androgens. They have multiple sources, to be specific, adrenal production as well as testicular production. The adrenal production is present in both males and females, but females have an enzyme that are able to convert androgens to estrogens. So don't worry, even if you produce androgens, you're female, you have an enzyme that converts it to estrogens. So what are the functions of androgens? Androgens are important during embryonic development because it's the one that causes virilization. Virilization is the anatomic patterning of the genital organs towards a male pattern. The anatomical programming of the male organs towards the male pattern. So that instead of clitoris, then there's a penis. Instead of the labia separating, they fuse together to form scrotum, something like that. They're also important in stimulating spermatogenesis. There is also evidence to suggest that androgens improve libido. So the more the better. There is also evidence suggests that androgens stimulate or promote bone mass and muscle mass. And that's why men will then tend to be masculine. And lastly, androgens are responsible for development of secondary sexual characteristics. When you talk of secondary sexual characteristics, you mean things like development of beard and the like. So those are androgens. Great. Let's look at the last endocrine organ. So the last endocrine organ we're going to look at is the ovary. Again, we will not look at the other ovarian functions. We will just focus on the endocrine functions of the ovary. But just as we've done for the testis, to give you a small overview of the anatomy of the ovary. So the ovary has this central region, which we call the ovarian stroma or the ovarian medulla. And this outer region, which we call the ovarian cortex. The ovarian cortex is the one that contains the different follicles It contains the follicles at different stages of development. The ovarian medulla contains connective tissue and blood vessels. If we say that the cortex contains the follicles at different stages of maturation, then you realize that there are those follicles which have very few cells, but there are those follicles which are very prominent. Now, let's look at the cell types which are usually present on a mature follicle. If you remember them, that would be the secondary oocyte, usually surrounded by the zona pellucida. Then the cells outside there are the ones we call the corona radiata. This is cumulus U for us. Then this one here are our interest. We call this one the granulosa cells. These are the granulosa cells. And just external to that, the cells of the ovarian stroma that surround the follicle constitute the thicker folliculi cells. So once again, remember these are the granulosa cells and these are the thicker folliculi cells. After ovulation, this is the part that goes away. The structure that remains is called the corpus luteum. Now look, the granulosa cells will be these cells. They constitute what we call granulosa lutein cells. The thicker follicular cells will be still here, and they constitute what we call the thicker lutein cells. Therefore, okay, this is better. So that is the secondary oocyte. This is the zona pellucida. This is corona radiata. Cumulus U for us, the antrum. So these are the granulosa cells. It's a population of follicular cells anyway, granulosa cells. External to that is the thicker follicular cell. When this one is ovulated, these ones remain. Now these two are the ones which actually produce hormones, these two. So which cell types in the ovary actually produce hormones? We have the granulosa cells, which are those ones. We have the thicker internal cells. You can call them thicker follicular cells. After ovulation, these ones, thicker internal, become thicker lutein cells. And the granulosa cells become granulosa lutein cells. So these are the cells responsible for endocrine functions in the ovary. So there was another question which we can't access because I'm using a different platform. We'll carry on. Now let's look at the hormonal axis in female, the same way we did for male. Things are close, similar at some point, for a big part actually. So whatever we said, hypothalamus secretes gonadotropin releasing hormone, which acts on the anterior pituitary. So the effect there is to secrete gonadotropic hormones, which then act on the ovary. These gonadotropic hormones are follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now, see, follicle stimulating hormone acts on the ovary. The aim is to promote maturation of the ovarian follicles. So basically for follicular maturation or follicular development, you can call it folliculogenesis. But FSH also stimulates secretion of estrogen hormone. On the other hand, luteinizing hormone causes ovulation. Apart from that, luteinizing hormone promotes secretion of progesterone. So this is the hormonal axis in female. And therefore, I'll give you a question actually. You will not discuss this one because of time. You'll just do it on your own at your own time. So you will state the physiological effects of these ovarian hormones. You'll be taught this more in physiology. In anatomy, we've done something close to it when we looked at the female reproductive cycles. And that's why I don't want to go into it because of time. Right, so we are now done with the endocrine system. I will invite you to ask any question you have. If you don't have, then I'll give you a short break, maybe just 5 minutes. Then when we come back, we start on the next class.